Hello, chess fans. Welcome to another edition of Chess Chat, a program designed to give you, the viewer, a better understanding and an appreciation of the wonderful world of chess. I am your host, George Merijanian, Program Director of the Wachusett Chess Club, which meets every Wednesday from 7 to 11 p.m. in room C-199 of the McKay Campus School at Fitchburg State College. And with me is my trusty co-host, Martin Lane, one of the strongest and most active chess players in North Central Massachusetts. Welcome, Marty.
Hello, George.
Marty, you know, it was 60 years ago that the Soviet Union actually was able to acquire its first world chess champion. In fact, his name was Mikhail Botvinnik, and he was a Russian. The Soviet Union it was existing. And you anything about Botvinnik? He has an interesting history.
Well, Botvinnik, who dominated chess from the 30s right up until the 60s, was born actually in what had been part of Finland at that time, known as Guakkala, now known as Repino, I believe.
Repino, yes.
And is now part of Russia, which was right outside of St. Petersburg. And he learned chess fairly late in life, I understand.
Yes, it was actually not until the age of 12 that he learned the game. And he didn't stop playing in schoolboy tournaments until the age of 14. But by the age of 16, he was of master strength and actually was developing into one of the strongest players in the Soviet Union. And in 1931, when he was 20 years old, he won the USSR Chess Championship. And he went on to win it 6 more times during his career.
Right, and we've spoken about this before, that chess was a major political it was a goal of the Soviet Union to dominate chess in the world. They saw this as a propaganda tool.
They used it as propaganda. Actually, maybe we have actually a photo, an early photo of Botvinnik, taken probably in the this is probably his peak, yes.
Right.
This, I would say, this photo is taken probably in the early 1950s, after he had won the World Championship several years after. But it's interesting how he won the World Championship.
Right.
You know actually how he won the World Championship?
Well, the reigning world champion during the 1930s was the Russian, or former Russian, Alexander Alekhin.
Yes.
And there had been negotiations about setting up a world championship match against somebody, but they fell through because Alekhin died unexpectedly. Was that 1938?
1946.
1946.
In Portugal.
In Portugal he died, okay.
Yeah.
Well, then there was no world champion, and they needed to find a way to determine a new world champion. And so I believe the International Federation came up with a World Championship tournament, choosing the top, yes. Was it 6 players, 8 players?
They designed it for 6 players.
Okay.
What's interesting, up to that time, the World Championship was decided by the champion and choosing a challenger. The International Chess Federation had no say in organizing the World Championship.
Right. He could defend whenever or
he
not
chose,
defend.
He chose. Here is actually 1948.
Right.
The 5 players, and we stay on this photo, from left to right, we have, on the left we had Dr. Max Euler of the Netherlands, who was actually a previous world champion. He was the 5th. He lost the title to Alekhin. Alekhin had won it, lost to him, but Alekhin regained
then won it back, right.
And then we actually have next to him, we have actually, who is that? I'm trying to think. That's Smyslov, Vasily Smyslov,
right.
Another strong Soviet player. And then we have Paul Keres of Estonia, one of the strongest players at that time. And then Mikhail Botvinnik in the glasses, the 4th from the left. And then we had actually the only American, Sammy Reshevsky. Right. Now there was another American who was invited, who was one of the top American players at the time, named Reuben Fine, but he declined to play because actually he claimed various things. He was too busy studying psychology. He became a psychologist. But he also claimed, you know, this is unfair. You have 3 Soviet players, 2 Americans, and 1 Dutchman. You know.
Without going into the details, there were a lot of players who were unhappy with the way it was set up. But these players were, without a doubt, the top players of their time.
They were the top players of the day. So in 1948, the International Chess Federation did what they called a match tournament. And this was actually the 5 players, and they played a quadruple round robin.
Right.
And the first half was played in The Hague, in the Netherlands, and then they switched over to Moscow for the second half of the match.
And it was right at this time of the year. It was.
Yes.
It went from March to the end of May, the 2 halves.
Yes, it did. Right. So those does coincide. And by the way, Botvinnik, winning this World Championship, he became the 6th official world champion.
Right.
You know, prior to that, you know, starting with the first official world champion, Wilhelm Steinitz, no one ever thought of, for example, of, you know, how do you determine, they never thought of the concept of a world championship. But it was Steinitz who said, I will play for the world championship.
And at that time, people could just declare themselves
yes,
world
they
champion.
declare themselves, yeah.
Right.
So in the order of things, Botvinnik became the sixth official world champion.
And then he held the title off and on for the next, what, 20 years?
He won it in 1948, and actually he had a match against a fellow Soviet player named David Bronstein in 1951.
Right.
That match was drawn. And under the rules of the competition, a drawn match, the champion, world champion, retains the title.
Right.
Then he played Vasily Smyslov, who we saw in that photo from 1948, and he beat him in 1954, but then they had a rematch, another match in 1957, and he lost it.
Right.
Botvinnik lost it in 57, regained it in 1958, and then held it until 1960, when he was defeated by a young player from Latvia, Mikhail Tal, who only held it 1 year because Botvinnik the following year came back and took back the title.
And then he lost it to Petrosyan.
He lost it in 1963 to Tigran Petrosyan, another Soviet player. So he held it from 1948 to 1963 with those 2 1 years, you know, where he lost out. Well, anyway, from 1940, what's interesting about this 1948 match tournament for the World Championship is that one of the players was Paul Keres of Estonia, and he was actually considered one of the top players of the day. And we're going to present a game, for our viewers, a game from that match tournament in which Botvinnik was white, and he opened with D4 against Paul Keres. First move.
D2 to D4.
Okay. Now, I don't think we've actually presented any queen pawn opening, any D pawn openings, have we?
Right. No, we've been opening E2 to E4 using the king pawn. The D4 move is just as good. It accomplishes almost all of the same things. It attacks 2 squares in the center. It opens up a diagonal for the dark squared bishop. It opens up some room for the queen in the front. And so it's a perfectly good move.
Okay. So, yes, it is. And now, Black's choices, Black actually has choices here, options. Black actually could do the same thing, could play D5. Right. That's a good move, you know, a logical move. But Keres, on his first move as Black, played Knight F6. Now, what do you think of that move?
Right. Well, it attacks both the E4 and the D5 square. It prevents White from playing E4 right away.
Aha. So that is essential. That Black prevent White from putting another pawn in the center.
Black doesn't want White to dominate the center. That's key. Then White.
So what do White now responds to this?
White wants to contest the center. He wants to control space, and so he chooses to play the pawn on C2 to C4.
Okay, so that's White's second move, C4. Okay, so now we have Keres, his second move coming up, and he could actually play still play D5. That's still a possibility. He could actually choose to play G6 with the idea of putting the bishop to G7 and the castling.
Right, and there's a whole family of defenses known as the Indian defenses.
Now, why do they call it? Is there a reason why they call it Indian defenses?
In ancient India, where the game originated, the early rules were that you could not move a pawn 2 spaces on its first move. You could only move them one space.
Square. All right, so that's why it acquired its name, Indian defense. Okay, what Keres did on his second move was he played E6. All right. So now, this is a move which actually opens up now for this dark squared bishop to move out. All right, so what does White do against this? Or what can White do against this? Are there choices?
The important thing in the opening is to develop your pieces. He has a number of choices. The bishop is wide open. The king's knight could move to F3, which is often done.
Yes.
He chooses to play the knight to C3, a nice strong move. It's behind these pawns. It develops a knight. Again, strengthens the hold in the center. It attacks this square. Now, if this is the move that's threatened, E4 is threatened next, and to really dominate the center, Black has to do something about stopping that move.
All right, and so in order to stop this pawn to move to E4, Black could have responded, again, D5 was always good. But he played a very good move, bishop B4, pinning the knight stopping the advancement.
Takes away the defense of e4.
Yeah. Now this actually has a name. You know, in chess, every opening,
has-
every defense has a name. What is this called?
Well, this is called the Nimzo-Indian defense. There's that name Indian because this pawn was moved out by one space. That gives it the Indian characteristic.
Okay.
And Nimzo comes from the player Aaron Nimzovich.
Aaron Nimzovich. So it's a contraction of the Nimzovich Indian defense.
Right.
And Aaron Nimzovich was actually one of the leading players in the 1920s and 30s.
And a leading theoretician.
Oh yes, he contributed so much to chess opening theory that there are openings and variations and sub-variations named after him.
Right.
So he actually popularized this. This had been played before, earlier than, but actually, I think Nimzovich popularized around 1914, around World War I. But this caught on. All right, so now it's Botvinnik's fourth move coming up.
Right. He could continue his development with knight to f3, not worry about the pin.
All right. Anything else?
He could also attack the bishop right away, forcing black to do something about that pin.
Okay, so the putting the question, we call it putting the question to the bishop immediately, is a good option because this bishop now cannot retreat to a5.
Right.
Why?
Because he'll get trapped in one of the oldest traps in chess. White simply advances the b4 pawn.
And then forcing the bishop back to b6.
And then he pushes, winning the bishop.
And the bishop is trapped and lost. Okay. So this would force the bishop actually to capture the knight on c3 because it would make no sense to retreat.
That would be a severe loss of time.
Exactly, because you've given white an extra move here. All right, so that's a possibility, a3 immediately. Anything else now?
Botvinnik plays conservatively. He decides to play the pawn to e3, which is a very quiet move. It does strengthen this, but there's no threat against it. It does open up a diagonal for the white squared bishop, but it closes in now this dark squared bishop.
Aha, so actually there's an advantage and disadvantage.
Right.
All right, that's what happens in chess. In the opening, every move you play has actually an advantage and a disadvantage.
Right.
Now it's black's turn, Kiri's turn. It's his fourth move, and he can simply castle fast.
Right.
He plays castle on his fourth move. Okay, so now it's Botvinnik's fifth move coming up.
Right. And now he chooses to attack the bishop.
So he deferred putting the question to the bishop until after he played e3. He waited.
Right.
Okay.
And also Keres waited to exchange pieces. He went ahead and castled. He waited until he was forced to do something.
There's nothing better than to take because actually retreating has no purpose at all.
Right.
So bishop takes c3 check.
Right, and then
the next move is
it's
automatic.
Forced. Yep, the bishop.
So
B
sixth move for white is b takes c3.
C3.
All right. So now it's black's move coming up, his sixth move, and he has choices. Again, in this position, he still can play d5. That's that can be played against any d4 opening. He could also play b6 as a possibility, with the idea of playing the bishop to b7. He could also play c5. That is, if he goes here, offering this pawn here, this would be rather awkward to have triple pawns. Not good to have triple pawns.
And isolated.
And isolated too. All right, so what he did here, instead of playing c5 or b6 or d5, he played rook e8. That was his sixth move, black's sixth move, rook e8.
Right.
Okay, Botvinnik's move coming up.
Now, this was an interesting move. He could play knight to f3, preventing e5.
Yes.
But would he choose, or he could develop his bishop to d3.
Where it'd be very actively placed, by the way.
On this diagonal.
Yes.
He chooses instead to play the knight to e2.
Okay.
Now, both of these players are known for their position. This is what we call positional play. They're not looking at tactics right now. They're simply putting their pieces into good places.
Well, is this like a cat and mouse?
Right, this becomes cat and mouse.
He's playing the cat and waiting for the mouse, the nibble.
Different from some of the other games we've looked at.
Right, exactly. Because this is rather unusual to bring the knight here,
blocks the bishop.
Blocks the bishop. So he has a plan. He must have some sort of plan.
Right.
All right. So what Kiri's does on his seventh move is he plays e5. Putting the rook on this file, he now supports the advance of e5.
And he's not worried that white is not going to take that pawn. Not only can
because
capture, but it also isolates these. It would isolate these as doubled pawns, and he doesn't want to.
So what you're saying is it's not good to have double pawns, and it's even worse to have isolated double pawns. Yeah. All right. So taking the pawn would be not recommended at all.
Right.
All right.
So
what he
does is plays the knight. This was his idea, to play the knight to g3. It reopens the line for the bishop.
All right.
It does defend this square. It also attacks the f5 square.
Okay. So now it's Carey's move, 7th move. Now he could actually, he gains nothing by taking here. E takes d4 because he actually reconnects the pawns. He could push the pawn to e4, but there's no need to do that. What he does instead is he now plays d6, which now opens up now for this bishop, the light squared bishop to move out. So d6, the 8th move for Carey's as black.
And then Botvinnik decides he's going to develop. He plays the bishop to e2. He could play there if he wished. No, he couldn't.
Well, yes, he could because bishop d3, because he actually, no, because the pawn can be pushed and attack it.
So he's going to have to, so he plays here.
But again, as you said, this is positional play. It's almost like they're jockeying for position. No one wants to make a mistake here in placing the piece on the wrong squares. All right, so now it's black's turn, his 9th move coming in, and now he could actually, well, see, the trouble is this bishop is rather limited where it can go. It can't go here to f5, it can't go here. So what he does is he plays instead the knight, the b knight, knight b, d7, which further defends the pawn on e5.
Right.
Okay.
And Botvinnik takes advantage of the opportunity to castle.
So finally,
again, a good, strong positional move, gets the king out of the way, centralizes the rook.
So it took him 10 moves, but he finally castled. But at least he castled, and we saw that black castled actually on his 4th move. And that's why it is so important. The castling is so essential. I see so many chess players who don't see the value of castling and putting the king in a safe place. They refuse to accept the concept that there's safety needed for the king. All right, so it's Carey's move coming up, and he plays c5. So now we have a double attack on this pawn, but it's adequately defended.
Right.
But it does open up now for this queen. It opens an avenue for the queen to come out along this diagonal to a5 possibly.
Right.
All right, so now it's Botvinnik's move.
And I think he plays this pawn. This was an interesting move. He plays it the pawn to f3. A little puzzling.
That is puzzling. Yeah.
It blocks off this diagonal somewhat. It does protect that square, perhaps for
to advance that.
E4.
So maybe he wants to actually create actually a pawn, a very imposing pawn center here. All right, so f3, he plays f3. So what Carey's does here, he captures. He takes the c pawn.
Right.
C takes d4.
Right.
So he's won a pawn here.
And there's really no question. Botvinnik recaptures with the c pawn, undoubling his pawns. It would be not especially strong to play the other way.
No. By taking with the c pawn, he's now connected and created this chain, this wall. All right, so now it's Carey's move. Now, this knight has no future here on d7, so he plays the knight to b6, which attacks the pawn on c4, but it's adequately defended by the bishop on e2. All right, so now it's Botvinnik's move.
Okay, well, he's looking to develop on his queen side, and if he's looking to see where he's going to put the white squared bishop, the dark squared bishop, he could put it here, but it doesn't have much effect going this way. He chooses to go bishop to b2, which puts it on a very strong diagonal, aiming right towards the king.
All right. So this is more actively placed along this long diagonal. Okay, so it's Carey's move now, and what he does, which is rather interesting, because he takes his e-pawn and he captures it. He could have left it right there because this is adequately defended. This d-pawn, the rook, is in defending this, so he didn't actually have to make any capture here, but he chose to play e takes d4.
Right.
Okay.
And that's a little puzzling because it leaves this pawn back here all by itself.
An isolated pawn.
It's
also
weak.
not good to have. Isolated pawns are not recommended.
Right.
All right, so
and
what did...
now, Botvinnik could recapture either with the pawn, he could recapture with the queen, he could recapture with the knight. Instead, he chooses to push ahead pawn to e4.
Okay.
Creates a chain here, intending to capture that later.
Yeah, because now he has the queen and the bishop on this, so there's no way that pawn can be saved.
Right.
So he has to give the pawn back at some time. So after e4, what Carey's plays is black. He plays bishop e6. Now, what's he doing here?
Okay, well, he's attacking that pawn twice now. Once with the knight, once with the bishop. So
and it's only defended once.
So he has to bring another defender over. He could capture with the queen if he wanted to. But He decides to develop the rook and defend the pawn at the same time. This is a semi-open file, I guess you would call it.
Right. So that makes sense. You know, let's get a new piece into
Out of the
play.
corner and
Yeah,
into play.
because the rook on A1 has no future there.
Right.
It has to get into play here. Now, what Carries could have played here on his 15th move here is he could have actually put more pressure on that pawn
Right.
and played his rook to C8, the rook on A8 to C8, putting more pressure on this pawn.
Right.
See, but of course, if he had done that, it would be very easy actually for White actually to defend this pawn again.
Sure.
By simply
He just
taking
takes
queen,
with the queen.
and it's adequately defended.
Right.
But what he played is actually a rather puzzling move. He played rook E7. All right,
Right.
so Black plays rook E7,
Yeah.
15th move.
And
now,
the usual purpose would be is intending to eventually double up on one of these files, either here or there.
You mean bring the rook over here, and then bring this rook over here,
here.
and double these rooks and put more
then
pressure here?
then that would make sense.
Yes, right. So is that maybe that's the plan?
Maybe that was the plan.
Maybe that's the plan. Okay,
Right.
so he plays rook E7.
Okay, and now White elects to recapture the pawn with queen take on D4.
All right, very good. Oh, this is very strong, having a
Right.
queen and a bishop lined
Because
up
it
here.
pins the knight. The knight cannot move because mate is threatened if it.
Well, yeah, the knight actually couldn't do something like coming back to like the D7 here,
No.
because actually this is now undefended. It'd be
Right.
checkmate. All right, so this, but the knight could
come
come back
back
here,
and that would probably
defend here. But
yeah.
then we're in a defensive position.
Right.
It's an awkward position to be in. All right, so after queen takes D4, here's another strange move. He plays the queen instead of playing the rook over to C8,
Right.
which would make sense to you and me.
Right.
He plays queen C7.
Right, and that seems to contradict the idea of doubling on that file.
Yeah, but you would think this rook on E7.
Because now what's the rook doing?
What is the rook doing on E7?
Right,
Ex-
it's
okay.
out of place.
All right. But again, this is the type of game they're
Right.
playing. They're playing
Right.
cat and mouse,
Right.
positional play. It's not tactics. We're
No.
not in the realm of tactics, but we're going to see what happens following queen C7. So what does Botvinnik play now for his 17th move coming up
Well,
here?
he plays pawn to C5, and this sets a lot of activity. From a very positional game, it becomes a very tactical game from here on. He's attacking the knight, he's attacking this pawn.
Oh, wow.
Something has to happen.
Yeah, because actually with the attack on the knight, and of course, and he's also threatening again to take the pawn and forking the queen
Right.
and the rook. All right, so this is rather awkward.
So we've switched from positional
Yes,
to tactics.
Tactics. Now suddenly this is a turning point, yes, where tactics is going to take over here. So he takes here. D takes C5.
Right.
Okay, and how does Botvinnik respond here?
Well,
on his 18th move?
he could, of course, take with the queen, but in tactics, it's a nice idea to take a less valuable piece and attack a stronger piece. So by taking with the rook, he's attacking the queen. The black has to do something with the queen.
Has to
Plus,
move
it
it.
brings the rook to a very strong rank here in the middle. It's clear.
And it also vacates
Vacates
this
this
square
to double
for,
with the other.
for this rook on
Right.
F1 to come over to C,
Right.
C1 and now double the rook.
Right.
So yeah, so taking with the rook is the superior move.
Right.
Okay. All right. So now the queen has to move, and there are not too many squares where this queen can go. It could actually go. It could go back to here, offer exchange of queens. It could go back here, but he chose to play queen F4. Now what's this all about?
Well,
Queen F4.
that's equally puzzling. Maybe he thought he could get some play get some counterplay, we call it,
Yeah.
over on the king's side, though it's not really clear just what that would be, because all that white needs to do, tactics again, is just simply attack the stronger piece with the weaker piece,
Ooh.
or the more valuable with the less
All
valuable.
right, so now the queen is under attack and has to move.
Right.
And it can't, there are no squares here where it can retreat to.
Well, if he goes to h4, for instance, the queen is lost. The queen is trapped.
Oh, yes, you mean if the queen goes to h4?
Right, which is a free square now,
Oh, yes.
but simply playing to here, and the queen is lost.
Because of the, yes, right. So the queen cannot go to h4, it'd be lost. Okay, so the queen now retreats and goes queen b8,
The only square it
the
has.
only square it has on the 19th move. Okay, now what does Botvinnik do?
Now,
20th
he
move.
plants his rook right on g5, attacking the g7 pawn.
And
Very
it's
straight
also, is this not a threat of queen takes f6?
down. Now, now
because
the
of the
knight-
pin?
Right.
So all right. So this is being attacked, and it has to be defended. Now, what he could have done, well, this is hard to point out. What he did was he brought this knight knight bd7.
Right.
On the 20th move, this knight protects this knight, but he overlooked one
Right.
important thing here.
Right. again, tactics, there's a very sharp sacrifice. He plays rook, take g7, check.
Wow. All right, so now he's taking here, and, well, I mean, he could actually, well, actually, he could, yeah, if he moves the king, he's just won a valuable pawn here, so he accepts the sacrifice.
Right.
He takes the sacrifice, not realizing the consequences of king takes g7.
Well, right.
Now, how does Botvinnik continue here? Now, it's his 22nd move coming up. Is there actually a mating attack here?
Well, he has a check. The knight is pinned. He cannot take here.
And he's attacking, but with the check on the king, he's also attacking his knight twice.
Right.
So he's threatening actually to get 2 knights back. Right. You know, if there's actually
so if the king if the king moves away from the knight, he gets a knight.
All right. So what he says, I'm going to come up. Carries plays king g6, comes up and protects this knight again. All right. Okay. So now it's Botvinnik's
move, and he plays queen to e3.
Okay, and in this position, Carey's resign.
Right.
Why did he resign?
Because mate's inevitable.
Because actually the king cannot move back because the knight controls it. He can't take the knight here because if he accepts the knight with the king, then the queen he would checkmate mate here. Also, if he chose to take the knight with the knight. The knight takes h5.
Checkmate
here. Yeah, and actually has several checkmates.
Or here.
Right. So the game is over.
Right.
So he resigned. Well, anyways, this is a rather interesting game, positional play, a hard-fought game. And again, Botvinnik went on to win the 1948 match tournament in Moscow. That was where the second half of the match was played.
Now, I understand there's a really interesting event coming up in Fitchburg in June.
Yes. I'm glad you mentioned that, Marty, because actually the mayor of Fitchburg, Lisa Wong, has initiated a series of First Thursday events, and there's one coming up on June 5th, which is actually going to involve, I think the theme is called sport, it'll be sports that month.
Right.
And chess is a sport. You know, a lot of countries, chess is considered sport, recognized by national Olympic committees. Well, anyways, there's going to be a live chess game actually at Monument Park, opposite the Fitchburg Public Library. I think it's going to take place in late afternoon.
Now, describe a live chess game. When you say
live chess game is actually where humans,
human chess pieces,
actually play the roles of pieces. We're going to actually have people reenacting a chess game, but they are the pieces. They move. They actually capture. They do all the things that the pieces would do in a chess game.
Now, you and I are going to be playing the game. Is that right?
Well, it's very possible you and I. Yeah, I may see to another player, and watch it. May enjoy watch it. But I think we actually have. If there's actually a slide or info as far as how, if people want to become a live chess piece,
take part in
this first Thursday live chess game, at Monument Park opposite the Fitchburg Public Library, and as I understand it, the individual will be dressed up as chess pieces. There'll be some sort of chess paraphernalia, either chess hats, but you can contact. There are two email addresses you can contact. You can contact Sally Cragen at Comcast.net or DiscoverFitchburg.net. Those are two email addresses that people, if they want to become pieces in this, and we are looking for pieces. We're looking
for participants.
So actually, how many we're looking at for 32? We're looking for 32
We need 32 people willing to dress up as chess pieces.
And we will
take part in this.
And youngsters, we welcome youngsters, older people, all ages who want to be involved in a historical event. We've never had a live chess game in Fitchburg.
We're running out of time here.
We are running out of time. So I invite all of you viewers to join us next month in June. We're actually meeting on the first Monday in June.
Which is the first, probably.
Yeah, it'll be the first. So we will be meeting right before the first Thursday. So we'll actually be able to tell you about the first Thursday live chess game again as a reminder, and hope that you contact Sally Cragen at Comcast.net or DiscoverFitchburg.net and become a live chess piece and become part of Fitchburg history, chess history. It's a great game. It's captivated Martin and me for decades. Join us next time.